Hi, this is Bernie out here in farmland country in Western Canada. I was telling you about yesterday. Now remember, wash your hands, sneeze into your arm and cough into it. And I guess the other main thing is if you are really concerned you might have COVID, go and get tested. There's a number of locations and you can do that. So we got to get through this thing. The farmland is no exception. And we're working hard, people in this industry, to get the crop in this spring, I suppose, and make sure you get your food system. Well, it's not really warranted to you. Nobody actually deserves food. I guess nobody's entitled to it, but we all hope we get it. We all go to the grocery store planning to have the shelves full and all that, so hopefully it all works out. At CCI Elevator Pro Prayer Group, we're praying that that happens and asking other people to do the same. And we will get through COVID. There's been many plagues through the centuries and, devastations. And they were talking about the Spanish flu killed 50 million people worldwide 100 years ago. That seems like a high exaggerated number to me, but it might be true. You can trust everything you read on the internet. And, they had to do certain things to get through that. Wash their hands and stay clean and cleanliness and all that. So we're doing that nowadays. We're obeying the government and working on that and all the policies of the health people and companies that are invested in that. And I like what Larry said at Ellison at Oracle, that he's going to build a system so people and doctors know what's happening. I like that. I often tend to follow the billionaires and what they're doing with the money as a humanitarianist CEO of my company, Connections Consulting, and I like that. But this guy was talking more like I do. I always venture out into business as my first foray publicly in what I do and how I want to help people with it. I can help you. That's my foray here today, my forte and my foray to help you. I can help you. These bins beside me probably, I'm guessing, would be about 40,000 bushels in capacity. When we used to build them when I was a kid, working for my dad on his side business, his PSA, personal sales account company, we would build the big ones in those days. The big daddies were 5,000 bushels. Well, these are at least 8 times bigger. This is how big the commercial farm has got and become in the food production system. So it's important when everybody invested in it complies, they get the opportunity to put the crop in the ground for you to eat. And we hope, and hopefully those restrictions won't apply to the point where they're incapacitated and can't do so. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think the government will get involved and ensure that. I know there's been some threats on media so that costs of production might be too high, might as well just park it. Park the combine, park the tractor, and next year when we're through COVID, we'll grow. Well, we only have a 60-day window usually from one crop to the next. Otherwise, the food system no longer has a surplus. 60 days. So we depend on growth as a country and a uniformity across the world system to have growth every year in crops. So that's where we're at, and I'm believing it's going to go through. I mean, I'm glad to see Cargill's testing their people. Their meat plant, I hope, will be back up in production and before too long. I mean, they're accounting for half of North America, all the food in the meat side of things. They're a big family company, been around for 100 years, 150. Jim Beam bourbon's been around for 225 years. Canada's only been around for 150. Anyway, some people have been invested in the country and their business of origin, or their country of origin and their business for a long time. And, we want to see these people continue to go on and not restrict. That's what we're hoping, right? So go from there. I know Larry Ellison he won the in 2010. I was reading the American Cup in sailing, and it cost him a lot of money. I guess he put about $100 million into it for a hobby. So if we can spend that kind of money on hobbies, I'm glad to see people want to help with the system. And Larry, I'll just tell you something right now. Bernie May here, and I have my performance strategies database benchmarking system software netware production that I'm working through right now, and have been doing so for the last 4 years or so since I launched my company. And as you're purporting your effort in systemology in the computer world, data network systems, the cloud, all that, if you want a capstone for that, you look me up, because maybe there's something my social networking, social data performance can help with, just in tracking human behavior. And I know there's a lot of effort into going into watching where people might have COVID, but I know the communication between the people and the doctors is the primary component and effort you're working on, from what I'm reading and seeing. And maybe I can help with that in a preventative, preemptive way, where you even know before they show up at the hospital based on human behavior and benchmark tracking. So anyway, sometimes people get together and work on an effort, and not in collusion. The good guys don't use that word. It's a coercive effort. Coercive. So there's that thing down in Vegas, Freedom Fest, that not Warren Buffett, Steve Forbes is putting on, and I'd be interested. Maybe we could I might go down there actually, if the borders are open by July 1st. I'm hoping they are. Listen to some speakers. There's that Wade girl talking about poverty. I'd like to meet her. And another lady about education. Forget the name, I'm sorry. And then I wouldn't mind hearing that Jordan talk about the new emerging cultural revolution, to see what he's thinking. I know what my views are, but it's always good to hear insight from other people, right, in a cooperative, communicative society. So go from there. Larry, I would meet you, and my canoe trip is eligible to you and your wife, your lady friend, whoever you got there, and any of your circle of friends. You're welcome to, like I was saying, Saskatoon's a small airport like Palm Desert. Fly in from Rancho Mirage, that's it, Rancho Mirage, and we can make sure you can have a private group or join a public group if you want to meet new friends, whatever. It's all okay with me and us here at Connections Consulting, Connections Mountain Adventures, I suppose. So my background, for people that know me a bit or know me a lot, and anybody needs to hear it again and be reminded, so I remind, or there might be the odd new person catching on to me here still, is business-to-business marketing in the agriculture sector is where I formed out of through my upbringing. My grandfather was an elevator manager. My father, I'm talking grain elevators, right? And my father was grain elevator manager, grain merchant guy, merchandising business, originating the grain side from the farm to ship it off to customers overseas, I suppose, or domestic markets, and a crop input salesman. And then I took over in that and followed in the footsteps as well. That's my background. And just to give you kids, and especially city folks, and even my kids down in California for that matter, just some examples quantitatively. Those grain bins, they would haul their grain to an inland terminal, I suppose, after it's been harvested and put away for their own storage and keeping. And in the old days, when the land was settled here by farmers, originated over 120 years ago, by now I suppose, the average farmer would have purchased about a half section of land. That's about 320 acres. That's about the size of Larry's ranch he's living on down in California, almost. And some guys were maybe a section and a half. That was the family farm. They would haul their grain by before the 1-ton truck, they used to haul horse and buggy in the old days, and little grain elevators across the prairies were about every 7 miles, because that was the time it took to get to town with one horse and buggy load of grain and back. Well, nowadays, and I've told you before, a bushel of grain, there's about 36 bushels, 0.744 in a metric ton, I suppose. And that's the TONNE. That's the whole world's on that except the United States for some reason. I don't know why. The metric ton. And the United States has their own system, and they're the big brother of the world, I suppose. So whatever, it doesn't make sense, eh? The big brother has their own way. Everybody converted to a new way, but the big brother's still needed for some reason, right? And they are, and that's the way it is, and that's the way they push it forth. But they'd haul now with a semi, okay? Went from a 3-ton up to a tandem truck hauling 600 to 700 bushels. So in a metric ton, there's that many bushels, 36.744. That's about the size of an Uber car, I told you before, right? So they'd haul to their nearest grain inland prairie terminal. And if you look down my YouTube timeline, you'll see a video on one of those that I managed in the previous past. And when the railway cars show up at one of those grain inland terminals, there's about 136 cars on a train, and they each hold about 100 tons. That's about the equivalent of 100 Uber cars of grain. And so you multiply that by about 136 cars. That's like between 13,000 and 13,600 Uber cars of grain size, all heading off to the coast or the port terminal to go over to China, I suppose, if they're buying from us and we're not in some hostage situation and where we have charged their CEO of their high-tech company and holding her house captive in Canada for fraud. If we're not in some intramural relationships that aren't working between country to country, I suppose, well, then that's happening. Otherwise, we arbitrage over to the shortest factor in getting the grain off to the market, the readiest buyer with the most money and that wants it urgently, and that's the way the world works in the market. So now the average farm size, remember I told you, is about 320 acres. Well, if anybody's been watching the sports world, they know that the LA Rams and the Dodge Chargers, the LA Chargers are, I drive a Dodge Charger, sorry. It's a good car, it's economical, fairly inexpensive, and you just look ordinary. So, I might get a Corvette if some of my accounts pay their bills from last year from China and Japan. I might actually buy an ergonomically protective brown Corvette that blends into society and doesn't look too intensive as to, salt people, right? So this is salty. Anyway, so that grain, so the land size, that arena down in Los Angeles in Inglewood, the Hollywood Arena, is going to be open this spring, outside of COVID restrictions perhaps, but that was the launch deadline to have it built. 70,000 fan capacity, going to be like twice the size of any other NFL stadium, I suppose, expandable to 100,000. Well, that would be about the size of the original farms in Canada when Western Canada was settled. And so a half section of land, and maybe a section and a half would be about the same size of two of those arenas put together. Well, nowadays, to give you the point, these commercial farms have grown to the size, and they're still run by people. It's not like people run corporations. Families do, right? So the farm guy that runs it might have a son or a daughter or two or three or four, I suppose, but they also have a team of staff. And these farms have grown, and some of them are Hutterite colonies, but some of them are independent private farmers that started here through their families 100 and some years ago and have just kept going. Then there's the odd private investor from Chicago or wherever. They're corporation companies. Some of them are lawyers, and they have land investments too from elsewhere, but somebody's farming it. And in the case of something like this where it's a family farm, they might be as big as a Hutterite colony, 10 to 15,000 acres, upwards to a half a township. Well, a township of land, when you start looking at counties and rural municipalities, a township of land has 36 sections of land in it. So some of them are half that size, and there are guys that are as big or bigger than a township nowadays. They got 8, 10, 12 staff. Some of them are agronomically trained to go inspect the fields, look for weeds and diseases to make sure your food is safe. And some of them drive semis, others run the equipment, and they have high-tech computer savvy. And then somebody's in charge of marketing the grain and hedging the price risk and all that, knowing the options. There may be a day, I might even sell airplanes to some of these farmers someday. I think that'll be an awesome project, because they might have to fly over to an Arab country and market their own grain themselves. Who knows how it might all crumble, right? I hope not, but I think it'll be pretty savvy. I once looked up at a big combine, and they're worth anywhere from $350,000 to $500,000. Some guys got fleets of 10 of them, and I thought, I'm going to sell one of those someday. And I went and I did. I did a 3-month project for Case IH at Drumheller, I suppose. Sold about 10 or 12 of them. I'd have to check my resume. I forget now. It's been a few years. But I think it'd be cool to sell some airplanes, and maybe I've offered Kenworth trucks to sell some of them. And you look down my timeline on my playlist on YouTube, and you'll see Kenworth is in there. You get some good picture agriculture and what goes on. I've offered, some of these guys need new semis. There's other guys that are getting to that edge where their farm size hasn't been big enough, but now they need one, and so on and so forth. And the oil patch too, but I'm just talking farming right now, and food. And so land size again, a township of land, and that's how some big farms are, or a half a township. 16 to 18 sections of land, 16 times bigger than the original settlers 100 years ago, I suppose, up to 36 sections, and that would be the size of about 5,000 of those football stadiums all put together. So in the city, folk, you get an idea how big some of these farms are, like 5,000 of those football fields all put together. That's a lot of land base, and the crop goes in right about now. May 1st has been kind of the normal, up to May 7th at the latest. And in a 3-week period, it's all in. So they got all this equipment streaming across the land so you can get your food in there. So that gives you some quantifiable data, so you can understand and relate to, right? And in Canada and the US, I suppose, we're pretty much maxed out. There is no more land to produce more food. There's 9 billion people projected to be on the earth, provided we don't get wiped out by a plague or whatever. But up from our current 7 billion in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years. 9 billion. So we got to produce another 30% more food. A lot of that production is going to have to come out of some of the third world countries that they aren't divested into good farming practices yet. We've been working on other countries like the Ukraine, sending over people, Africa, agronomist people teaching good sustainable farming practices. And, Bill Gates has invested money in that, different people with wealth. But, in Canada, the US, and Europe for that matter, if there's going to be more production, it's going to come from continued increase in science genetics. And we've already done probably 3.5-fold from when I started in this business in my early 20s and managed my first location, retail outfit, buying grain and selling the crop inputs, I suppose. Probably a 3.5 in the wheat, fold increase, 3.5 times more, and probably, and that's, I'm just talking hard red spring that makes most of your normal bread wheat. There's other varieties like soft white that's more for cattle feed or something, and corn. They've been quantifiable, probably higher increases, and maybe some canolas. There's been high genetic yield canolas. So the food system has increased. And what's important is, and I've always preached the message of science, business, and faith, and environment, and all together. Like you gotta have environment and business and the social culture side all working together, right? And that's always been my message from day one. Well, when I know people have divested in different views of food, but what matters the most and I don't bash people who want organic or vegetarian or any of that. But what matters the most in all of it is sustainable agriculture that produces a healthy food system. And people have to go through all the steps. And I've talked about thalidomide before. Well, that was bad science. Most science, if people are seeking the wisdom of God, develops good, innovative, inventive things that help society. Bad science didn't in that case of thalidomide. If you had like when you look at GMOs and transgenic crops and things, it's healthy. It's went through the test to produce more quantity, high quality. They fix the nutrients right into the crops, like adding zinc and manganese, I suppose, to help defeat malnutrition. Malnutrition, not starvation, is like the second top killer in the entire world. Malnutrition. That's why people are in these lunch school feeding programs to make sure kids, even in North America, but other countries, third world, I suppose, it's been a problem. So there's a lot of investment, and the point is, if it's good science, it's going to produce something good of high quality and quantity. So in today's day and age, when the matter is COVID and a world who's facing devastation, we can't quabble and debate these things to the point of our own stick in the mud. We have to try to think uniformity and health for the best of the overall situation. Surviving is key, and that's been my message all the time. You can live in health and survive, and splinter groups who draw their line in the sand they're going to run into trouble, because society will survive as a whole with the most that want to survive, unless people disappear into a little splinter group commune somewhere. We got to do what's best for the greater good all the time, and I've always believed that community is always about the greater good. You back yourself in the corner and you become a rebel, nobody's going to want you, and then there's a point where you don't get taken care of. So your cause, unless it's going to break a new paradigm that's going to help everybody, it's going to end up being something selfish, and that's no good. So anyway, that's that, I guess. Larry, I was going to say something else to you too, but if you want to meet down in Vegas at that convention, maybe we can talk more if there's a collaborative effort here between our various software benchmarking programs to help out with the new. Because Larry, I think what you're doing is good. Ellison at Oracle, there's been issues. I was listening, like, when's the next pandemic coming once we get through this one? We're in the end times. And, if this, Larry gets this system built, and whether he wants me to help or capstone it or whatever, the next one's coming probably. And if the medical system can't talk and have knowledge in their integration in their systems, what do? Ontario was complaining about that very problem in Canada. They're trying to quote statistics and project, and the media, they weren't even, and the one lady who was talking was kind of slovenly at it. Out of all the speakers, she was the only one, and I had a problem with her. Everybody else was answering and very abruptly, being humble and getting information out, but this one was sloughing it off. But part of it, the issue was also the systems weren't talking, and it wasn't that she was making an excuse of it. It was just her attitude was wrong. But I could see the problem was the system. So, Larry, if you get that going, it might be the future, whether you can help for this pandemic or not. It depends how quick you are with programmers and stuff. But so I'm on to that. The next thing is my training, some of my background. Like, I know farmers and people across Western Canada. I worked in this industry most of my life technically, and So I know people, in one of my training jobs when I was training people and I was learning myself in a younger career state, I was traveling the western half of Western Canada and meeting with producers and help supporting agri-retailers, about 250 agri-retailers in our own internal, and with commodity futures and hedging programs and all that. And met people that way. And went out and held meetings with groups of farmers to promote our services. That was back in the day when farmers would load one rail car because they wanted to save margin. They wanted to cut costs. Well, that's the same reason why people don't always want to go to church nowadays. On the faith side of my Good Samaritan Pro, they can do their own learning on YouTube and the internet, get their own Bible, get their own books, and have their own spiritual faith. You don't need the high burden cost of someone preaching at you in a church telling you in a rigid way when you have your own belief. An example's me. I don't believe much like a lot of people, but I try to equate with a lot of people, most everybody, and get along. So and it can be challenging sometimes to fit in everywhere, but that's when you go. You just leave and disappear and take your time out. And I guess, Larry, if you want to go up and bring your friends and just not be around people, you can book a full trip and just bring a half of it of the people, and I'll make sure you guys have a good time up there. I'm very high-tech valley savvy. Know some of the people down there, know the people, and have met them, and I enjoy that side of the business and company with those people, and my family, like my kids from that side of the family. I've met, I know people down there, so I regularly try to stay in touch with my kids. So that's all going forward in the future and all that. But the talk today is about Sales Blog and what we're up to, and that's the theme here. And I guess what I want to ask you is to think about two things as we talk through all this, what we just did, and what's the rest of this video here is, what are your goals? And when you think about your goals for life, but your goals for short term to get through COVID, I suppose, and then what about your health? Like, are you thinking long term with your health to get beyond chronic measures and diseases and just having optimum health? And I've promoted the Kiani message, and so that's been, very true for me. I've only had 3 head colds in 15 years. I've been healthy. My ascension into the scripture combined with my Kiani belief in taking their products, and I promote and sell those. But we're also, what are your goals? We want to look at that because when you set a goal, one of the aspects of our company is we have business planning. So if you're a new business entrepreneur, and Larry, I know you are, right? No, like you got into the game in the 70s, right? So I know what you're saying. You've been around a long time, but guys that go long and last still have to have that young attitude. So goal setting is about the business plan, and I suppose we write it down for a reason, because we forget what we're up to and we stay focused when we're written down. Sometimes it's hard to become spontaneous and go to a convention in Vegas and when you didn't have that in your plan. But a plan just helps you make decisions. You still move out of it a bit to do other things if you have to. And then there's Travis. Who expected COVID? I didn't. I know we're in the end times. I know there's things going on, but I didn't expect COVID. And it's just been weird. It took a month to get our heads around it, I think, some of the quicker people. And I'm surprised the government's reacted fairly good in some ways. But when you got to rely on me to tweet, to tell the Premier of Alberta, who says they have 500 to 600 masks extra, to send a few to Nova Scotia because the nurse, and I'm sorry about the tragic killing out there, in honor of all the people, and my condolences, and the RCMP working in that, trying to help fix it. And it's too bad when a cop kills people, or somebody faking that they're a cop or whatever it is. People need to be able to see authority and know, but you gotta trust yourself and our Lord above, and I guess have a watchful eye about everything all the time, right? I mean, because there could be some bad cops too. You don't know, like, but I hope they get that fixed. But the point is, there was masks short, and the one nurse that was her husband was complaining to Justin Trudeau she didn't have a respirator to go to work, and she was a nurse, and so. Anyway, I tweeted and said, you're sending some to Quebec and Yukon. Why don't you send a few to Nova Scotia? But point is, Larry, we need a better health system, integrated communication system in the network world. So you get on it, and I'll help if you want it on my side with the performance strategies, benchmarking, social benchmarking stuff, benchmarking, netware. And go with that. And then, so our services at Connections Consulting are training. Number one, that involves leadership, purpose, sales, and customer service. And in those, we have 3 courses. The first part of it, leadership and management of staff, customer deals and staff follow through, and staff 1 and staff 2 is our leadership and management of staff. And then our sales training is called management. And so go from there on that. Our projects, we have 2 kinds. We have business process improvement, and collaboratively we have about 3 different levels of what customers can buy into on that. For the basic business processes, right to the total thing, 3 different levels. We have a Go Market project, and in that, that's about building your market. That's our second project type. And then our third level of services involve business planning and the market around developing your communication process and flow through social media platform and websites, and just how you communicate your message so people can find it easily, logoing, that kind of assertion. That's our third level of services. And this year our business operating strategy is based on 3 things. One, on the training side, is getting our corporate training programs into people, as well as our adventure outlet. And then on the project side, we've got our marijuana health program. And I also met farmers working with Agritrend Agrology, because I traveled around and met with all these agrologists and working at these trade shows, as I had in other jobs throughout my life. So, I know people across Western Canada, but the marijuana health program, I suppose, we are calling on stores right now